morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio, and we need to talk about something weird that's gone and happened with Pokemon card 151, Scarlet Violet 151 as it is in English. You see, I check all these prices, the value of the cards on a pretty regular basis. It's literally part of my job. Like, this is what I do. I talk about the Pokemon trading card game, and I look at all assets. I'm constantly checking the price of these cards, but I'm also constantly checking the metagame and any news and anything tangentially related to the Pokemon trading card game, etc. This is what I do. And over the past couple of weeks, I've noticed a bit of a trend. Now, in terms of cards generally for 151, we've seen what we would generally expect. As a general rule, and there are exceptions, but as a general rule, we've seen the price of cards dropping quite nicely. So if we take something like Erica's Invitation, for example, lovely special illustration rare, beautiful card, but it's going to crash in price, and it's been crashing in price. Since the release, it has crashed from... Well, it went up as high as $60, it's now down below $30. And this is what we would expect, honestly. This is the kind of thing we see for basically every card in basically every set. So that shouldn't surprise anybody. And, I mean, look, we could, if you really want, we could spend the next 10 minutes doing this, but it's going to be largely me repeating myself, if I'm honest with you. You know, take something like the Alakazam. Beautiful card. We like the Alakazam, but it went up to a high of $45, and now it's down to about $35 and clearly still dropping. Although, to be fair, that one's not crashing per se, but let's not pretend that one isn't falling in price. It is. Most of these cards are falling in price quite nicely, and this is exactly what we would expect. But there is a subset of cards that's going a little bit, well, against the grain, I think is a nice way to put it. And that is the illustration rare of the cool Pokemon. And I don't mean the special illustration rare. I mean just the ordinary, everyday, run-of-the-mill illustration rares. So, I mean, the one that's really doing it, we might as well start off with the big one at the beginning, Charmander. Charmander is an illustration rare, an ordinary, everyday, run-of-the-mill illustration rare. On release, it went down as low as $20, and now all of a sudden it's up to $35. And it's a little bit weird, because if you look at the most recent solds on TCG Player, there was one sold for $12, but then there was a lightly played sold for $30, and a near mint sold for $50, so actually $35 is underselling it. You can see that we went down, then we went quite drastically up, then we went quite drastically down, and now we're creeping back up. And we're not talking about some short-term trend here. It has been going up steadily and consistently for 5 weeks. That last proper dip that we saw was October the 5th. That was 5 weeks ago at this stage. So let's not all pretend that, well, you know, it's been going up and down. Nah. There were times it was going up and down. It's not going up and down anymore. This Charmander is creeping up nice and steadily. I say creeping up. It's going up quite nicely. And it's just an artwork rare. It's got the pull rate of an artwork rare. You are much more likely to pull the Charmander, or at least an artwork rare, than you are a special illustration rare. And yet, as it stands at the moment, Charmander is outpacing a lot of these cards. You know, the Alakazam and the Erica I just showed you, yeah, they're actually below Charmander in terms of value right now. As ridiculous as that is. It's absolutely absurd. So is the Giovanni for what it's worth, but the Giovanni's just had no real value to it since it released. So it's a cool card. If it's one you want to be picking up, brilliant news, it's cheap. But yeah, this is a bit of a thing. For what it's worth, Pokemon don't actually publish the numbers when it comes to exactly how likely you are to draw a card. But for comparison's sake, your special illustration rares like Charizard, there are 7 in the set. And your illustration rares like Charmander, the non-EXs, there are 16 in the set. So I'll let you figure that one out yourself as to whether it's more likely you'll pull a Charmander or a Charizard. I'm willing to bet it's a lot more likely you'll pull a Charmander. And okay, fine, Charizard is much more valuable than Charmander, but I'm 99% sure that all the special illustration rares have the exact same pull rate, because why would you not just print them all as sheets with the exact same numbers? It'd be weird if you didn't. And Charmander's outpacing or on pace with a bunch of them. But what's the I hear you shout? Come on, mate, that's Charmander. It's just a Charmander. Everyone knows Charmander's good. Yet we can keep going. Charmander's the most egregious example of it, but there are a bunch others that fit in here very nicely as well. So we can look at Pikachu. Now, I've been saying for a while in both the English and Japanese set, this Pikachu has not really broken into the top 10 in terms of value, and it's weird that this Pikachu isn't more sought after and more valuable. Well, if I did the list today, Pikachu would be in at number 8. Pikachu is finally breaking into the top 10, as you might expect. It took a while, it's getting in there, and it's coming in at $25 right now. Near enough. And yeah, again, there was a bit of a dip. Like 3 weeks ago, yes, there was a bit of a dip. But the fact of the matter is, it's pretty much back up to the peak, and this is another one. Now, it's not going up quite as steadily as Charmander. The last dip was a lot more recent, but we're still seeing a very, very similar kind of thing, which is, this is not a card which is just dropping in value like we would generally expect. It's an illustration rare, i.e. not one of the rarest cards to pull. It's not a special illustration rare or anything like that. And what do we see? We see it just going up in value. It's a $25 card as just a regular illustration rare. And don't get me wrong, right? This Pikachu is one of the coolest cards they've done. This is, outside of the weird special promos, which I'm not ranking they're too good, but outside of them, this is my second favourite Pikachu that's ever been done. Those of you that have been following the channel for any length of time will know that my favourite is the Okacheke from Paldea Evolved. And honestly, for most Pokemon, if Okacheke's done an artwork, it's going to be my favourite. But after the Okacheke Pikachu, this is my favourite. It's amazing. But $25 for an illustration rare? That's absurd. But we can keep going. How about Squirtle? Now, Squirtle and Pikachu are right fighting neck and neck at the moment. Squirtle's coming in around about $24, and it's kind of weird. Compared to Pikachu, it's, checking TCG Player, for instance, it's got a slightly lower market price, but actually the most recent sold, it's a little bit higher. And none of these are hugely playable, to be clear. They're evolving basics. Now, to be fair, the Charmander is maybe the best among them, just because, of course, the Charizard from Obsidian Flames is a very, very good deck right now. So you're going to need a Charmander to play. And to be fair, this is probably the Charmander to play. There is another 70 HP that does see play here and there, but this is generally the best Charmander. So, okay, fine, it's the most playable, I suppose. But come on, most playable Charmander, it's not exactly a huge category. My point here is that it's not really playability that's pushing these up, and if it was, I can understand if it was just Charmander, because you know what, at least that one is seeing a bunch of play, but it's not. Squirtle's coming in here as well, and this Squirtle is fine, but it's not like anyone's really playing Blastoise right now, and it just keeps going. Now, this one is not quite as up as we saw from the Charmander, but make no mistake about it, we had a low of $12, and then it's been kind of going up and down a little bit, but if you draw that line to normalize things, it's still trending very much up, and it's only like $1.50 away from its peak, and it's probably going to keep going up. Certainly, 2 of the last 3 solds are above the stated market price there. This is another card which is just going up and up over time, like so many of them. And I could give you another example, and you probably, come on, you must have guessed which one I'm going for here. It's the Bulbasaur. Now Bulbasaur's not quite doing as well, and look, Bulbasaur is the worst among them. Generally speaking, if we look at all kinds of trends of who's the most popular Gen 1 first partner Pokemon, etc., Bulbasaur tends to lose. That's the case here. Now, Bulbasaur's still sitting at $20. Make no mistake, $20 for an illustration rare is kind of silly. given the pull rates. But it is at least coming down. You know, that one was as high as $30 just about a month ago. Now it's fallen to 20, and there's a recent sold for 10. This is still way higher than we would expect, but this one is at least bucking the trend a little bit. But then again, we could start looking at some stage ones as well. Because Charmeleon is sitting there at a $20 card, and you'll notice we've got a general trend very much upwards. And not everyone even plays Charmeleon in their deck because of the whole rare candy thing. So, right now, I really think we can start looking at this and going, you know what? This isn't a playability thing at this stage. This is just people are going nuts for the first partner Pokemon. Ivysaur is sitting in there again at about a $20 card. Although some of the recent souls are a little bit lower. Now that one kind of went sharp down, bit up, and then is kind of holding steady. It is technically trending up, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that is really trending up in a significant manner. I know it's not, you know it's not, we can move on with our lives. But then again, we've got the same thing with Wartortle here as well. Wartortle is again like a $20 card. Now, this one is again coming down from a high of 23 down to 19 of a recent sold of 9. So it's not necessarily spiking like the basics are. But I think at the very, very least, we can say that the basics are spiking and going up in a way which is weird, and the stage ones have held their value far better than we would generally expect. And if we compare this to other sets, it does start looking a little bit silly. Like if we have a look at Obsidian Flames, for instance, as a nice little example, there isn't an illustration rare higher than Cleffa, which is a $4 card. I'm not even going to show you the graph. It's a $4 card. You don't need to see a graph for a $4 card. Bearing in mind, I just showed you 7 illustration rares that were all around $20 or higher. And to be fair, there are a lot more there that are above $4. And bearing in mind, there's only 16 of them in total. 7 being $20 or higher. How is that sustainable? And I suppose that the first partner stage ones are at least starting to come down now, which is nice. But that's absurd. I mean, we can have a look at Paradox Rift. I showed you the other day that Groudon was needlessly expensive, way higher than it should have been. It doesn't really make a huge amount of sense, honestly. And to be fair, Groudon is still weirdly sitting in at a $30 card, although it is coming down quite sharply from its $40 peak. This one makes no sense to me. There's no real explanation other than, hey, Groudon's pretty cool, right? It's not particularly playable. There's nothing here which would suggest this should be a $30 card. But this happens kind of once a set, where the collector base as a whole goes, hey, let's pump up this card. And they do. So we end up with a $30 Groudon illustration rare, which doesn't make any sense and is weird and a bit silly, and it's a complete anomaly with no really good explanation, alright? But then pretty much all the others have the decency to be $10 or less. Having 7 cards that are illustration rares out of 16 that are $20, including a $35 Charmander, that is a thing which is weird and unusual, and it's not what we usually see. And certainly, the fact that they're actually going up, nah, that's weird. Charmander, Bulbasaur, and Pikachu are very much still on the upswing. And on the one hand, I can look at this and go, look, they are beautiful cards. I kind of get that. That makes sense. And on the other hand, I look at this and I'm like, what? Why? The illustration rares, the pull rates are not that low. I mean, I'd like it if they were higher, frankly. I want it to be easier to collect the sets. But I kind of get it. Kind of makes sense to me. But the pull rates are too high for these kind of prices. And it's not that the fact that Charmander is at 35, because like I've shown you, a $30 Groudon. It is a fact that the number of them are that high and that they're still going up. The fact that they are rising is what is the weirdest thing to me right now. Because make no mistake about it, your Charmander, your Squirtle and your Pikachu are very much still on the rise, and that is weird, and I don't really get why. But hey-ho, I've told you what's going on, and now it's over to you guys. Which of these cards have you pulled? Which of these cards have you bought? Did you get a good deal? Go nuts in the comment section, but be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wasi. That's where we talk about Pokemon and a whole bunch of other card games. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts, join a Discord, and all kinds of fun things. Oh, and get shout-outs on the channel, like the lovely Ashley Munns, who's been a supporter of ours for a little while now and seems to be a very lovely person. So shout out to them for the support and the loveliness. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.